regular city council meeting. Can everybody hear me okay? It's going to be a little difficult tonight. We'll have to talk a little louder just for the situation we have at hand here. So appreciate everybody for coming. We imagine most of everyone is here for the public hearing, so we'll get the meeting called to order and let the roll call show that all members of council are present. Do we have any additions or deletions to the agenda?
We just have one, which is a rental license for the consent agenda. And what is the address on that rental license? 214 Fisher Street Northwest. And that would be recommended to approve contingent on successful completion of the inspection.
Okay. Thank you. I'll entertain a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Second, Dennis with the first, Bob with the second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries. At this time, we will recess the regular meeting at 7:02, and we will open the public hearing at 7:02. And the public hearing is on the 2021 street utility improvement project. Mr. Cabot.
Okay, I'm going to remove my head. I don't know how well the computer down there is going to pick up the sound. Can we do a test for those folks?
Can you hear it? I see Jean nodding her head, so she must be able to hear you.
Yes, I can hear him.
Otherwise, we can bring the computer down this way.
Oh, Jean said she can hear you, so if you talk loud like that, we should be good.
I will talk loud so everybody can hear, and hopefully the computer down there can hear. First of all, everybody probably signed in. There's a sign-in sheet. If you didn't, we signed in on the way out. So we got to list everybody that was here. There is an agenda. I think most people have it as well. My name is Chris Cabot with SEH. I serve as the city engineer for the city of Montgomery. And this is the public hearing for the 2021 street and utility improvement project. We're in view on the online neighborhood meeting. Okay. Any of you have gone in afterwards and saw the video that's on the website? Okay, the reason I mention this is for those of you that are on an online meeting, you're not going to see a whole lot different other than some updated numbers on the estimated costs, etc. So, real quick too, kind of the protocol that we follow for the neighborhood meeting is, the public hearing is, I'll present the findings of the feasibility study. And then I will turn it over to the council to ask any questions of me. And then at that point, to open up for public comment. So the feasibility study was actually ordered back in February, and it's a report that basically analyzes the scope of the proposed project, what is the estimated cost of the project, and how is the project proposed to be funded or paid for. And then the main reason for us here tonight is basically for the council to consider taking any public testimony, consider ordering ordering the project to go forward. So as I mentioned, why are we here tonight? Well, partly this is because the city council, under the direction of the Public Works Advisory Board, adopted a capital improvements plan to look at street utility improvements, infrastructure improvements throughout the community. And it's actually about a plan that's carrying the city to about year 2030, and a number of improvements have been identified. This is one of the first significant projects that was in the capital improvements plan. We're identifying the area as the Circle Drive area, but it also includes a segment of Hickory Street, Hickory Avenue, and Rogers Drive. And you'll see the map of that. Why this area? Well, this area is actually had a lot of water main breaks, more significant than a lot of other areas in the community. There's obviously drainage issues, and many of you know, at least who live in the Circle Drive area, that the streets are in pretty rough shape in a lot of areas. There also is some old sanitary sewer, in at least half of that neighborhood that does need replaced. So again, there was a feasibility study ordered back in February, which is basically an engineering study, which helps us identify the scope of the project, the estimated cost, and how do we propose to fund that project. More importantly, this is part of what we call a public improvement process. So the term we use is Minnesota Statute 429, which is state statute, which basically governs how cities can do local infrastructure improvements, where a portion of that cost is funded or financed through assessments to the properties that benefit from that project. And we'll get into that in a little more detail. Again, it gives the council an opportunity here tonight to then or consider whether to go forward with the project. Again, as I mentioned, Minnesota Statute 429. Again, this is why we're here, part of a public hearing. It's really, again, the most effective tool for cities to do local infrastructure improvement. So this is the project that is identified for the 2021 project. Again, the majority is what we're calling the Circle Drive area. And then Hickory Avenue, that the portion that is shaded, the portion that is in yellow from 1st up to 4th is proposed to be a full reconstruction. The segment from 4th to 5th is proposed to be a mill and overlay. The segment from 5th to Deer Trail is not proposed for any improvement right now because that was built back in about 2001 with the Deer Trail project. And then Rogers Drive from Hickory up to the golf course is proposed also as a mill and overlay. Just a quick recap what the difference is. Again, in the areas in yellow, we're talking for the most part full underground utility replacement, full complete reconstruction of the road bed, the subgrade, the road, curb and gutter, the whole shoot match. The exception is, and I'll get into a little more detail, this section of West Circle Drive and this section of North Circle Drive up to about here, and this part of Inner Drive. When it was constructed, it was developed later than the eastern portion. When it was developed, they installed PVC sanitary sewer. So for those that are served by the newer PVC sanitary sewer, that will not need to be replaced, and there won't be any service work to go along with that. So, but again, there still will be storm sewer and watering work throughout the entire neighborhood. Again, and the same thing down on Hickory Avenue. So again, as I brought up, water main improvements, water services. So whenever the water main is replaced, the water service from the water main in the street up to the right-of-way line, so the front property line, will be replaced. Same thing for the sanitary sewer. Where the sanitary sewer mains are replaced, the services will also be replaced from the main up to the proper property line. Storm sewer pretty much throughout that whole project, it will be proposed. The other thing that will happen with this project is we will incorporate the use of what we're calling a sump pump drain box. So there's a lot of people with sump pumps that go. For those that have to direct it out towards the street, there'll be a box to actually intercept and pick up that water and drain it into the storm sewer. So get it off the street, preserve that speed over time. Obviously, the street improvements, as I mentioned, the reconstruct obviously pretty straightforward. The mill and overlay hopefully is straightforward. Basically, the existing pavement surface on that portion of Hickory and Rogers will be milled and then resurfaced. So the whole pavement surfaces that we moved is basically a preservation project on those streets. More cost effective. The street isn't in a bad shape where it needs a full reconstruction. Driveway aprons will be installed as, again, where all the street is reconstructed. And then there is some sidewalk proposed. There is some sidewalk that's being proposed along Hickory Avenue from West Circle Drive up to Rogers Drive. This is basically to provide access from all the other streets into the park. And then a sidewalk from Rogers Drive up to at least the beginning of the parking lot there to the park. There's eventually other improvements that are proposed in the park, and there'll be able to be some sidewalks that will get extended in and throughout the park at that time. So again, I mentioned the Circle Drive neighborhood. It's hard to see, but again, where you see the gray lines, that's where the existing sanitary is already PVC. Where you see it as green, the green is where areas those are where the sanitary sewer, old clay, the root intrusion, the pipes leak groundwater into the pipe, which creates more cost to the treatment plant. Presumably, there's probably a number of you folks, if you're on the area in the eastern part of the development, that probably have sanitary sewer issues, where roots and trees have gotten into the lines and things like that. Again, this project will replace that sewer service up to the property line. It doesn't necessarily mean if you've got a problem that's occurring from the property line to the house, that this project wouldn't necessarily take care of that. You know, if that root intrusion or other issues are happening from the property line to the street, this project will take care of that. Again, as I mentioned, Hickory Avenue, part of that is proposed for a reconstruct. The rest of it is a mill and overlay. Rogers Drive, same thing, mill and overlay up to the property line of the golf course. If anybody didn't realize, the cul-de-sac connected on the golf course, so this project is not proposed to pave that cul-de-sac unless you come to some agreement or whatever with the golf course themselves. So the estimated cost of this project, for any of you that took really good notes during the neighborhood meeting, that we're pretty close, so we kind of finalized the estimates in the feasibility study. Number came down just a little bit, but as you can see, street improvements, just over $3 million. Storm sewer improvements, a little over 600,000, 617. Sanitary sewer improvements, 346,000. And water system improvements, a little over 700,000 in respective percentages. And this is what we call a total project cost. So this is not only construction, but it's also the engineering, the administrative costs, the bonding finance costs, et cetera, all thrown into the estimate. So how do we fund projects like this? So there's different ways to fund local improvements, but this is the general way these type of projects are funded. Number one, overall general levy. Citywide property taxes helping to contribute to the project. Fees from the different utility funds. We have the sewer fund, the water fund, the stormwater fund that help contribute to these projects, and can also bond or borrow money against those funds to help finance these projects. Assessments to the benefiting properties. Again, this is all part of the 429 project. Outside funding, people always ask about this. Well, when it comes to local neighborhood projects, it's very, very difficult to get outside funding for that type of project. And then basically, as I always say, some type of fair and equitable, reasonable balance of all of the above. So this is the funding as proposed in the feasibility study. Again, the respective utility funds, sanitary sewer fund, about just under 300,000, the water fund, about 572,000, stormwater fund, 617,000, and then assessments for the street, the water service. So there's an assessment for the service from the main up to the property line, and the same for the sanitary. For those that have sanitary sewer services in place, there's an assessment for the service from the main up to the property line. And then the general debt service, which is basically money that is borrowed or bonded and levied against the basically the general fund, the general contribution. Just another way to compare it, I always like to show this. So the neighborhood contribution, which is the assessments, about 953,000. or about 20% of the cost of the project is funded from the neighborhood that benefits from the project. The rest of the project, just under 3.8 billion, is funded by the overall city contribution, which is again the water fund, the sewer fund, the stormwater fund, and the general levy, the overall city property taxes. So talk a little bit about assessments and assessment policy and assessment methodology. The city adopted an assessment policy back prior to the Fifth Street project in the east end of town, back in about 2013, 2014. And they adopted it by ordinance. So the assessment policy basically was set up to be treating all single-family residential properties equally. If any of you have heard of assessments and dealt with assessments in the past, a lot of people talk about the front footage and this and that. It doesn't apply to single-family residential properties. Every single-family residential property is treated as a single unit. And we'll get into what that means. So that's all the base rate, as we call it, is basically set up based on that unit method. There is a way to assess larger non-single-family residential properties like multifamily, apartments, commercial businesses, industry. That is done on a foot footage basis, but it's equated basically back to the residential rate. And I'll show you what that means. The other thing the assessment policy does is it's a fixed rate. I'm going to tell you what the rate is here tonight. This is the rate that is proposed to be levied next year, and that the amount that would be due in October if you want to pay it in advance, or the amount that would be levied to the county if you choose not to pay it in advance. So when I say fixed rate, the rate is known. We're going to the project today. We're meeting. We can tell you what that is. It's based on the rates that were charged on the previous project, maybe adjusted for inflation. That way the rate is the same year to year, project to project, neighborhood to neighborhood, but basically everybody's treated the same. Again, the only adjustment is maybe an inflationary adjustment for the next project. And basically, if projects come in a little higher or a little lower, the fluctuation of cost is picked up by the other funds: sewer, stormwater, sanitary, water, and the general levy. Those were the adjustments in the project that picked up. So this is what I mean when I talk about unit assessments. If you picture this as a street project and a street that's not getting done and a street that is, for example. Every property, single family, is treated one unit. If you're on a corner, the side that gets done is treated as a half a unit. If it happens to be done on both sides, you get a half a unit and a half unit, it's 1 unit assessment. When we talk about larger, multifamily, commercial, industrial properties, we do a conversion from the single family rate to a front footage rate based on about 75-foot frontage, and equate that to a front footage charge and charge that a positive frontage for that activity is taking place. So this is the amount. These are for those that we tuned into the neighborhood meeting. These are the dollar amounts that we were talking about. These have not changed. This is what's proposed in the report. This is what these are the rates that would be considered or proposed for the assessment hearing in February. Again, that have been identified in the report. So for those areas that I showed you in yellow before, that would be a full reconstruction. The amount to be assessed is just under $7,028 per unit for the single family residential. For the mill and overlay, there aren't a lot in the single family, but there's a few. $1,622 approximately per unit. For the multifamily commercial properties where the front footage is applied, it's just under $22 per foot. We have a few multifamily properties, and that's about it. And actually, those were townhomes, and we actually converted that to a unit of the townhomes at just under $500 per unit. Residential domestic water service replacement, just under 1,300. So you can see 1,300. So $1,297.44 per unit. The residential domestic sanitary sewer service replacement, just under $1,100 per unit. Again, these are the rates that are proposed to be assessed in February. So this is not an assessment hearing. There'll be an assessment hearing in February, and right now that's the schedule when it's proposed. There'll be a lot of information sent out then. There'll be a notification of assessment, but I'm here to provide you some background if you have never been to an assessment program procedure before. So again, what's tentatively on the schedule is the council will consider the assessments in February of next year. Presumably the council would adopt the assessment policy or adopt the assessment role, approving the assessments. The assessments would become payable, interest-free from then up until October 31st of next year. After October 31st, the books close and the city prepares to levy those any unpaid assessments to the county. You don't have to pay the city during that period, only if you want to pay an assessment interest-free. In October, basically November, the assessments get levied, any unpaid gets levied to the county and become payable in 2022 at over a 15-year period at an interest rate based on the interest rate that the city gets for the bond. So the city will sell bonds for this project, and then they bump up the interest rate from 1 to 1.5% above that for other items. And then that amount of the interest rate would be a part of, would be the interest rate that would be charged to anybody that levies to the county. We don't know what that assessment rate is. Right now, cities are getting very good rates on bonds, so that will be reflected in the assessment interest. But again, we won't know until the city sells the bond. When you get your notice of assessment, you'll know what that interest rate is. 5%, that's some of them are kind of typical for certain cities. I don't know, Brian, if you have other.
The last round of bonding we did, it was, I think the true interest rate was about 2.2%.
City adds 1 or 1.5% to that, and that's where you're at.
But that's all going to depend on what happens with the bond market and the stock market and all that kind of stuff. We do have a fairly good bond rating with the city, and hopefully we'll be getting that even higher. And the better our bond rating, the lower our interest rate.
Again, there'll be more information provided on this, but there is options for what we call deferred assessments. Deferred does not mean the assessment goes away. Deferred just means if you qualify, you don't have to make payment on the assessment until, for example, you pay yourself. And the folks that would qualify for deferred assessment are seniors over 65, retired and over 65. Persons retired by virtue of disability, service persons that are on duty. And there is actually in the assessment policy, there is even a clause for this financial hardship. Again, deferred assessment does not mean the assessment goes away. It just means obligation to pay, and obligation to pay on an annual basis is deferred. The assessment still accrues interest. The amount of the assessment is still due at some point, typically in the house sale. Again, there'll be a lot more information with that with the assessment notices throughout January. So right now, this is the schedule as proposed. It's a little bit aggressive because this is a big project. We'd actually hope to be about a month ahead of where we're at now, but the whole COVID thing kind of threw us a little bit of a curveball, and we get creative here. So you'll see where we're at tonight. Neighborhood meeting. We did hold a neighborhood meeting back in May. It's been online. So we're here tonight for the council to hold public hearing. consider ordering the project. We'll basically be spending the rest of the time from July up through December preparing construction documents. Proposing to bring plans back to the city council in December, just prior to Christmas, and looking to advertise for bids basically in January and open bids in February. At that time, too, the assessment notices will be prepared, they'll go out. At this point, we're proposing the assessment hearing in February. And if everything goes good, we'll be looking at award bids as well in February. Construction likely would start late April, early March. I'm sorry, late March, early April, mid-May, April, kind of depends on the weather. The exception might be if everything works out well, we're proposing actually a pond construction on the golf course. We're working with the pond, the golf course ownership to plan that. If everything goes well, we might actually look at a separate contract to begin that construction this fall. Just basically an anticipation preparation for the work to happen next spring. So that's about the only thing that might happen this fall. Otherwise, again, we're looking at a bid opening next February and award bids soon after that. Again, construction starting in the spring and pretty much continuing up until fall. Anticipate that, the first area started will be the first to be finished, but there'll be some kind of work happening in the area. Basically, April, definitely by early May up until about sometime in October. They also, what we do with these projects is the first layer of pavement goes down. It'll also go, the paving will be done in the overlay area next year. But in the area where we're doing the reconstruction, the first layer of pavement will go down, but the second layer is saved until the following summer, really following spring. So basically, we're looking at coming back in spring of 2022, doing a warranty review of the project, see if there's anything that needs to be corrected or adjusted. And then that work takes place, and then at the end, we'll finish it off with a fresh new coat of wear course, as they call it, on the finished project. So with that, that's all I have. I will first turn it over to the city council. Any questions they have for me, and then at that point, Mayor, you can open it up to the public.
Okay, thank you, Chris. I have one quick question. At one point, there was some discussion of putting the continuity trail in between Northside Park and East Circle Drive in between 801 and 709. Is that part of this project? Is that going to still continue on?
Yes, thank you for Mayor. So what Tom was referring to is, and some of you may be aware, but I don't know if any of these individuals are here tonight, but right off the inner drive, off of East Circle Drive, there is actually a platted sidewalk right away. So under this project, we are proposing to extend sidewalk from there up into the park, basically tie that pavement directly into the park. So we'll be working with those property owners to acquire a little bit of what we call temporary easement. We'll need a little bit more room to work, make sure we can blend everything in, and then restore it. So again, the sidewalk will be located on that sidewalk right away, but we'll need a little bit of temporary easement to make everything fit correctly.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Does any questions or comments from council at this time?
Question, Chris, maybe I missed it, but sidewalks on the Circle Drive, east-west or inner, are there any sidewalks in the plan?
So the only sidewalk proposed is, I'm going to back up. You probably can't see it from there, man. Oh, so we are proposing sidewalk on Hickory Avenue from West Circle to Rogers Drive. On the north side of the road, we're actually looking at slightly narrowing this road. It's actually exceptionally wide, wider than it needs to be, at least from Fourth to First. It doesn't need to be as wide as this. So by narrowing it slightly and narrowing it to the south, we're gaining some room for the sidewalk on the north side within the public right of way. And then proposing sidewalk on the west side of Rogers Drive from Hickory up to the parking lot of the park. With the idea that there'll probably be additional work in the park someday in the future that'll help connect all more pedestrian ways through the park.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
It sure does, yes.
It's the only concern I had brought up to me is the length of the scope and the scope of the project and the lack of alleyways. So people getting in and out of there during the construction project itself.
Yeah, no, this is a great question. One thing I'd point out is the contractor still needs to have access. Now, it might be such that, you'll access maybe from East Circle Drive into the neighborhood versus, West Circle is closed, for example. The work will generally start up there in this far northwest corner, because you always start from low end. When I say low end, that's what the sewer flows to, that's what the stormwater flows to, and they work their way upstream from there. So likely they'll either run this way or they'll run that way. But as they start restoring, again, they need to have maintained access for themselves. There may be times where you can't get to your house with your driveway. You can't drive there, but you can park around the corner on another block. If there's individuals that have special needs and need special access, we just need to know that. And questionnaire sent out about that, and we'll work with you. But generally, there needs to be some understanding that when you dig deep holes and you put in utilities, you're not going to get to your driveway every day. So again, access will be part of the condition of the project. Again, and it may be such where you leave in the morning, one way, and then you come back in the afternoon from work and you find out I can't get in that way, and you got to go to a different spot. So obviously there needs to be some flexibility and some understanding. Hopefully that addresses it.
What about with truck traffic due to like My Tech there, United Steel, and the businesses there? Because there's a lot of truck traffic that goes through there.
Yep. Well, this is a mill and overlay, so generally speaking, this isn't real disruptive. They'll have to work with the industry there to confirm if there's certain days where the trucks don't come, and that might be a day they plan to do the paving. Because really, the only time it's going to be an inconvenience is the day they need to run a mat of pavement up the road. Trucks are expected every day. They'll need to figure something out, obviously.
I don't see any more questions at council, so I guess we'll open up to general questions. I kind of forgot to mention earlier that those that are joining us on Zoom, if you do have any questions, you can, I believe if you click on the attendees button, is that what it is?
Participants.
Participants tab, there's a button there that says raise your hand, and if you do that, our city administrator, Mr. Heck, will call out your name as they come in and address the question. So I'm going to open it up to the public. You can address Mr. Cabot just by raising your hand. At that point, just state your name and address and bring your question.
Chris, I'm Tom Hill, 713. What type of curbing?
So the question was, what type of curbing are we going in here? And I think it is what we call a barrier curb, so it's the front face, the 6-inch high curb. I think some of it in that neighborhood is what we call a phenomenal curb. You generally only use that in new development. One for existing developments, existing drives, you do this type of curb is much more secure and structural. So hopefully that answers your question.
So if the driveway aprons and that would be
Yeah, there'll be a knockdown curb cut, what we call it, for the drive.
Okay, I got a couple questions. Are the streets going to maintain the same width?
Generally speaking, yes.
Chris?
This is a great question.
Chris, can you repeat the question?
Yes.
That they're asked because
Thank
the
you.
people can't hear them.
So the question was, will the streets stay the same width? Generally speaking, yes. There is a few exceptions where the streets are actually just too wide for this type of neighborhood. If you're familiar with East Circle Drive, this part of Inner Drive, I think even Hillcrest, those are generally about 28 to 30 feet. And those, we're proposing those stay the same way. That's a good size for a nice, quiet neighborhood. For some reason, when they built the next phase of this subdivision, the streets got a lot wider. So we're proposing to narrow those so they'll be more like the width of these other streets. Again, more appropriate for this type of a neighborhood.
So how much are you reducing?
I think is it about 36 or 40?
33. I stepped it off today. It's 33 feet blacktop.
Oh, okay. So 34 feet face to face probably. So I think generally we're looking at 32, right?
So perfect.
Yeah. So by the way, this is Doug Scott, one of our staff engineers who will be working on this project. That's why I keep asking, you know something. You had another question.
I do. Going to what Nick asked earlier about sidewalks. And utilities. Utilities meaning electric, telephone, those type of things. We don't have sidewalks that are currently down. I don't know if adding these sump pump boxes, how far that's gonna go behind the curb, kind of thing. I'm just curious if there's any, because there is a lot of foot traffic and bikes, especially when the streets are gonna be moved. You do get a fair amount of people walking, kids, and there's no sidewalks. If we're gonna narrow up the streets a little bit, I'm a little concerned about that, but at the same time, all the utilities, especially on West Circle Drive, on the back lot lines, is where all the utilities are. Would this not be a good time to try and move those utilities out to the front so they're more accessible?
Okay, so I got to repeat that question. That was a long one. So the main question is, well, first of all, I'll take this in parts.
Okay.
So the main question is what we're calling the private utilities. The private utilities being telephone, gas, electric, cable. We work with them. They are going to do whatever it is they do. Okay. From my experience, they generally are not going to take stuff from that's on overhead and back lot lines or whatever. They generally are not going to do anything with them. The exception might be is whether like the electric company might want to look at reducing their risk for like power loss, storm damage, or whatever, but I can't speak to it. One thing we do is literally next week, first thing we do is we got we'll be contacting all of you know, to let them know our plans, the scope of our work, and so they can identify the needs they have. And so a lot of times, for example, I don't know, I'm assuming that's all original gas property neighborhood.
Gas is bad.
Okay, well, so typically on these reconstruction projects, they will come in early on the project, and they will come in and they will replace all the gas main. They'll get it up in the front property line, out of the way of our construction, et cetera. So anyway, we'll work with them and it'll be whatever the plans are. We'll know more once we have that information, we'll share. The second part of the question was what we call the sump pump boxes. Sump pump boxes, I don't think we have a picture of them. So the sump pump boxes are actually, will be set up near the front property line. So again, you're right, right away in this neighborhood, most of the streets I think are 60 foot total. So about approximately 30 feet from the center line of the road is your front property line, which is probably a good 12 to 15 feet behind the curb. So that's about on the extent of our construction, and that's where that box will go. And of course, we have to coordinate with utilities and where's the best place to put that. Last part of the question, and maybe I missed something, but sidewalk in the neighborhood. Sidewalk can get to be a fairly expensive endeavor. And I would say, generally speaking, this is not a neighborhood where trying to fit sidewalk is really challenging. Right away is 60 foot, it's not, we don't have a lot of width. If we were talking about a street like this street, which obviously has a lot of traffic, a little higher speed just because of the nature of it, that's where sidewalk makes sense. Hickory seemed to be a good solution to take sidewalk because it connects each of these streets to a sidewalk and brings people down to the park. Again, the neighborhood, yeah, no, there's no sidewalks now. So again, we didn't want to add a whole lot, but we were looking at sidewalk along Hickory Avenue. And that helps connect people to the park. And again, the neighborhood here can connect through this sidewalk, right? But it's generally speaking, it's a quiet neighborhood. It's not, you don't have a whole lot of outside traffic. It's just the people who live there. So again, generally not a good fit for sidewalk in a neighborhood like that. If it was a brand new development, yes. But trying to do a retrofit now is really hard. And that isn't usually very popular. I think I'll go with these first and then you're next.
Tyler's is actually progress. A couple questions. So, is this going to be done in a couple of phases?
Well, this is proposed to be done in one construction season. It's a good size project, but it's a reasonable size project. As long as it gets started early and under contract early, we can get done. When you say phases, again, they're not going to come in there and tear up the whole neighborhood all at once. They're going to do parts, and they're going to work their way out and access and kind of flip flop around for people and wherever they're at.
That's why I asked, is are we going to be claiming the road or a class 5
Yeah, so this, the question he has is the road going to be reclaimed? So reclaiming is the process where you grind up pulverize the pavement, basically recycle. There's nothing underneath what's saving it. Where the pavement is, there's not much gravel underneath, and probably going to be most likely the contractor is going to know it out all the way and recycle it somewhere else. We're not going to get a good enough product out of here like reclaiming. So what the nature of what's underneath is not anything like that.
Does that concern you with the soil? The wet summer, traffic issues,
Well, again, so contractors likely they'll leave the pavement, probably going to chunk it out, as you call it. Or if they do mill it, they'll probably mill it, and then they'll come back and take it out later. So they're going to leave driving surfaces. They got to get the trucks in and out. And then the section that's going to be built will be a section that's going to be a lot thicker, a lot deeper. They'll excavate that with bad soils out. There'll be 18 inches of sand. There'll be a geotextile fabric in the bottom, 18 inches of sand, 8 inches of gravel. Section to be maintained over time. What's there is very difficult to maintain. Not much you can do with it. And there was, at this point, there's nothing more to do with it.
And then will there be an option taking driveway extensions or that? Is there to be an option to ask the contract for a driveway to some extent?
So the question, sorry, I should have repeated some of those questions. So the question was about the option for people to do the rest of their driveway in this project. Generally speaking, no. You can sometimes a completely an agreement or a contract between you and the contractor. You can always approach them. In some cases, they'll take it on. In other cases, they'll say, you know, I got too much work to worry about this. They'll just do the apron and then the matching. So a lot of times these driveways are removed from the curb. You'll get about a 5-foot apron, and then there may be another 5, maybe 10 feet, depending on what we need to do to make sure we get that driveway fit back. Again, these roads will be designed as the best fit we can get to every driveway. And when I say every driveway, look across the street at your neighbor. They might have a flat driveway, you might have a steep one. We're trying to design a road that fits all of those. So again, some of the driveways go back 5 feet, some 10, some 15, get things to match. At that point, you can either hire a young contractor, work out a deal with the contractor that's doing the work. That's up to you.
Last question, then, right, street lighting, after the project's done, like, street lighting?
So the question is street lighting, the only thing we've done as part of this project. Again, NDEC will look at what work they want to do. Generally speaking, we're not proposing anything for street lighting. But we don't know really what the circumstances are with the lighting there either, so it can be something we can look at. But generally speaking, they'll probably continue with the type of lighting that's there. I'm gonna get her in the back and then in there.
I have two questions. So I live, trying to check, I live on 808 Fresh Drive. And our road has many big old trees along the boulevard. Are those, what's gonna happen with those? And then my second question is, what exactly is a driveway apron? Because we have a fairly new driveway. Is part of our driveway going to be dug up?
Yes, so the question is, trees, I'm glad you asked this question because I forgot. The second, I'll give you the second question after the first answer. So trees, what will happen with trees? Generally speaking, if there is a tree that's within about 10 to 15 feet from the curb, it's probably in jeopardy of being taken out of this project. I know there's a lot of big trees in some of this area with all the utility work, the road work, and in some people's cases, they may have their water or sewer service is underneath the tree. So we will be evaluating the trees. I haven't proposed necessarily that we contract with a forester, but we have done that in the past if we've got questions. We're going to look at it from a physical standpoint. What is within our construction limits? What might be impacted? And those will be identified to be removed. And again, generally, it's going to be the trees that are in the public right of way. So again, in that area between the curb and your property line. Again, that's public property. It'll be taken out with the project. It's not going to be additional cost to you. Trees that are up on your property, those are your property. They're not part of this project. Second question was regarding what is a driveway apron? Will our driveway be disturbed? Yes. To get the new street to fit, we need to remove, like I said, probably 10 to 15 feet is kind of an average. Has to be completely removed to make sure we can get that new driveway to fit back into the new street. A driveway apron will be a concrete apron up by the streets, 5 feet in your property or towards your property, and then the rest would be restored the same. If your driveway is concrete, it will be restored in concrete. If it's blacktop, it will be restored in blacktop. If it's gravel, I don't know if it's any, but it will be restored in gravel. Beyond that concrete apron. You had a question, sir?
Will the street be raised any higher or lower?
Again, the street will be designed to be the best fit to all the drivers. So we might, in some areas it may be higher, in some areas it may be lower, and we design it with computer design software to be a best fit. And when I always remind people, look at the driveway across your street. If you've got a street driveway and your neighbor's got a flat one, boy, that's challenging. Sometimes it's the other way around. So again, we do the best fit we can make. That road is going to be designed, we call it crown. So you want the high point in the middle. You want that street to be uniform, but you also want it to fit every driveway on every side. So again, it'll be a best fit. Yes, higher or lower, it's going to be both. I think her first. Yes.
Carol Blesak, 618 3rd Street, and Hickory. When you're talking about the sidewalk on Hickory, that would be on the north side, okay? And you did say that Hickory is going to be narrow. How much? How much is coming off of the south side of Hickory.
I don't think we're moving the south side much.
Yeah,
We're
so-
narrowing it from the north side.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, I just don't know the footage
understood
that we're
you to say-
narrowing.
I'm sorry, I understood you to say, you know, the sidewalk is gonna go there and about the narrowing, that's what you were talking about? the
Yeah, so-
sidewalk
Yeah, so the Hickory will be narrowed a little bit on from the north end.
On the north. Okay.
And that way it leaves us a little bit more room for the sidewalk. There might be a little bit more impact towards the property line, but it fits within the public right of way.
And what about when you, someone mentioned about the curb? Is the curb that we have right now, the whatever, the taller curb, right? Is that really conducive nowadays with snowplows? Isn't that lower curb? It's not. Okay,
That's the public works stuff.
okay.
I'd rather see us have the taller curb, because we have something to feel against for the plowing.
Okay, because of course, better. But there's all of those curbs, yeah, okay.
She don't like her legs already. She thinks crossing legs is funny. She looks down and knows that money. She gets it on like the Easter bunny. She's my baby, I'm her honey. Never gonna let her go.
She ain't got laid in a month of Sundays. Caught him once and he was sniffing my ass.
All right.
So the question was, how is the sump box, how does that work, especially if you've got some pumps running year round? Generally speaking, if there's continual flow, they are down about, darn near close to 3 feet. So they'll pipe from the sump box up by the property line down into, there'll be a tile line under the street. There's a sand layer. So down on the edge of the street, there'll be a tile line. It takes subsurface drainage and also takes the sump line. In theory, if we have a really, really cold winter, they potentially could freeze up. But generally speaking, they'll run winter long unless we have a real severe cold situation. At that point, the sump boxes are the point where it'll discharge. It'll discharge across ground just like it does today. So there is a redundancy, but under most conditions, it will operate in the winter.
That's what we've done for years, was we were pumping it out of our yards and it ended up as ice tanks on the street, so will that change anything?
Only under extreme conditions. If we have an extremely cold situation and these lines happen to freeze up, yes, that would be a situation that you would live with and that would happen again. In most cases, that won't happen.
Chris?
Yes.
So with the sump box, or the sump basket, there's a couple of ways that you can run your sump line to it. You can run it over the ground and just have it sit on top and drain into it, or you can actually tap in underground so that it's under, you're running your sump line under the ground and then you can tap it in to that sump basket.
I think we had a question in the back.
Sorry, I forgot to ask you about the trees. So if you do cut them down, you replace them?
No, if they're in the public right of way, we're not going to replace them, or are we? A couple of years ago, we had a project where a number of trees were taken down to the public right of way, and the city did have a program to provide a tree for somebody to put in their yard if they lost one in the right of way. I don't know if that's something we want to think about or consider. We haven't really gone there.
Yeah, we haven't talked about possible tree replacement at this point. What Mr. Cavett is talking about was the 2017 project, and a lot of trees were taken out. And after the fact, the neighborhood came in and asked if we could get trees. So we used the exact same tree inventory or list of trees that were planted on the Fifth Street project, and then people could select trees. I think there was like 6 or 7 different types of trees. The city bought them, we delivered them to the homeowner. They were responsible for planting them in their yard, but not in the right of way, because we want to avoid those roots going out and damaging the road and things like that. So we haven't talked about that. I think one of the things we need to find out is how many trees might be removed as a part of this project. So I do have a question on here when you're ready.
And maybe just a recap or a follow up on that. Yeah, trees are gonna be removed, we're gonna let folks know. We're gonna have opportunities later on to see, help you see what's gonna happen. Where is the tree gonna be removed, what are the things that happen on the project? And if anybody is sharp enough to process, on the Fifth Street project, trees did get planted in the project. That was county road, and under that project, they had proposed to replace a lot of trees that got removed. I think in hindsight, we were kind of wondering, should we have put somebody back in? But again, that was county's position. We felt it was going to be really controversial, and that it actually was. So, but yeah, that's why a lot of those trees got put in the boulevard. That's part of this overall plan. So
I got someone on the line here who wants to ask a question. Mr. Brockway. Got to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I'm just curious.
Maybe he disappeared. Yeah, I can tell him to unmute, and then he's got to do it. No, he's still muted. Oh, there he is. Okay, Pat, go ahead, ask your question. I got no sound, Pat. Now he's muted again.
maybe in the meantime, Nick, you had a question.
I wanted to just make a comment on the tree situation, Chris. So one of the things, a lot of those mature trees are ash trees, green ash in that circle project. And so in a way, this may be kind of an opportunity because with the ash borer, we're going to see a real problem going forward with ash trees. So in a way, this may kind of help us out a little bit too, to get some of these ash trees removed.
Good point. Well, everybody heard that, right? How are we doing online, or should we go for another question here?
Take another question here.
This will help. It'll help a lot. There's always those events that are unique.
Remember to re-ask the question.
Yeah. So thank you. So the question was, especially up on North Circle Drive, anybody that's seen that area during the heavy rain, that whole area floods. And actually, what happens is there's a river that passes between two homes to the north to the golf course. So a couple things that we're proposing under this project is obviously we're revamping the storm sewer. But the thing is this water doesn't have anywhere to continue to go. So we're working with the golf course. If you were to actually see where the water discharges, you'd probably laugh about this. It's obvious why this doesn't work. The pipe is literally underground. The material that is deposited into that, if it was ever a wetland or a pond, it's deposited to the point where it's actually higher than the pipe. You can stand out there and go down on the pipe that's coming in. So we're working with a golf course to excavate a larger pond. We have to go through a wetland permitting process, but generally speaking, it shouldn't be an issue. And so now there'll be a place for that water to go. And we're working with the golf course. They're looking at some of their own plans to extend ponding and the cat drains way up further north to the golf course. So not only an improvement for the city, but also for the golf course.
So my house is one of the houses. And there's, I call it, like whatever it is, that becomes pond then, if they look for this.
Yeah, basically from the property line to the north, we would start, we would put this pond with the excavator. And the way we design ponds, for stormwater management is, they're designed so that there's a gentle slope down in, it goes under the water, it'll become, typically it'll get vegetated with cattails or perimeter. That's part of it for safety, also keeps the geese from going in and out, things like that, and then it becomes open water and all of that. Again, that way that water can free discharge into a water body versus this, it just bubbles out, percolates across ground like that. Tom, yes.
So Mr. Brockway connected to me, by text message, and his question is where does the right of way start and how many feet does it go? So he's questioning, he said you mentioned the 12 to 15 feet, but from where? Where does the right of way start and then approximately how many feet does it go?
Well, the right of way is basically the public corridor for the roadway. And so I think everybody heard the question. So the right of way is the public corridor for all the public infrastructure, the sewer, the water, the storm, the services, the electric, the cable, gas, all those. So most of these right of ways in the North Circle or the Circle Drive area are 60 feet wide. So 30 feet from center line of the road for most cases. 30 feet from center line is the front property line. That's where the right of way extends.
So just to clarify, so typically speaking, if you found the center line of the road, you'd go 30 feet back to your property, and that would be the general vicinity where the right of way would end.
Well, that's the right of way line. The right of way line is these black lines. I'll call it the front property line.
Yes.
Okay, that would be the best way to describe it. If you look on these drawings, you see the black line, that is the front property.
Okay.
It extends across your whole frontage of your property.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Another question out here? Yes, sir.
I was gonna ask, I don't know what you're about, these storm pumps, are that automatic on every resident?
So the question is, and I think you're referring to what we call the sump box. Yes. So the sump box is a box that will set up near your property line, so probably about 10 to 12 or 15 feet from the curb line. And it's there that you can either direct pipe, which is, you have your sump pump that comes from your house, and the line that comes from your house, you can direct connect it into that box. Or you can lay a hose across the grass and let it go discharge into the box. It's got a grate. And the question was, will everybody have one? Generally speaking, yes. The exception is going to be down here in the overlay areas. We won't be doing them there. We won't be doing it on Drivers Drive because we're not doing the storm sewer. But where we're doing storm sewer and tile and reconstructing roads, we have the ability to do that. Now, with that said, I would recommend that everybody who lives along West Circle Drive, at least to this area here, if you're discharging it to the back, I would say continue to discharge it to the back. And therefore, you don't really need a sump box off the front, and I would recommend you don't. And the reason I say that is this is really a better place for the water to go, those sump lines, because anytime it's going into a box, it's just more infrastructure, and then there's always the risk and possibility of it could freeze, another condition. Now, with that said, if there's anybody that lives in, I think it's this house here, or these houses, there's a storm water sewer line that comes back here and it discharges onto that normal right of way. Right now, we're proposing here to vacate and abandon that line. So there won't be this continual dumping of storm water from the storm sewer onto this back property line. It'll actually get directed back to the north to that golf course pond, et cetera, where we can manage that.
Over the road or through a pipe?
Through a pipe. It will all be piped up. Where it goes today, it basically be better managed and improved infrastructure. Other questions out here?
So that, on the West River right there, so behind our place where the railroad track is. So there won't be all that water coming along that railroad
here, downstream, there will be less water. Upstream, nothing's changing. But there will not be this direct discharge of stormwater off of West Circle to the backyards through that storm pipe. That's just not the right way to manage water, but I understand they did it back in 1970 or whatever that was. Any other questions? Any other questions online?
Nope.
I thought I saw someone's hand up back here.
Anybody else? Last chance, one more. What?
If we don't have any more questions, we will close the public hearing at 8:06 and then reconvene the regular council meeting at 8:06. If anyone would like to continue to join us through the regular meeting, we will be making having a discussion on whether we approve this project or not here shortly. You're welcome to stay or free to leave at any time. So at this point, we'll move on to the consent agenda. I will read those off real quick. 4.1 is the approval of minutes. 4.2 is approval of claims in the amount of $957,987.09 and prepaid claims in the amount of $33,056.58 for a total of $991,043.67. 4.3 is acknowledge the appointment of Sean Benz to the fire secretary. 4.4, approve street closing request for St. John's Lutheran Church to hold outdoor services. Closing of Spruce from the alley on the east to 2nd Street on the west from 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. Closing on Sundays from July 26th to September 13th. 4.5, approve new rental license applications upon approval of inspection. That would be for 201 Ash Avenue Southwest, 104 Inner Drive, and the amended address of 214 Fisher Street Northwest. 4.6, approve resolution 37-2020, authorizing election judges for the primary and general elections of 2020. 4.7, approve critter getter contract, agreement unchanged and monthly fee is the same, $500 per month. Do we have any further discussion on the consent agenda? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Make a motion to approve consent agenda.
As amended? Okay, thank you. Butch?
Second.
Dennis? That's a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We'll move along to reports and presentation. First up will be Chief Hintz with the Police Department report.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm not sure what page in your agenda
84.
The police report's on. I'll just briefly cover it. We responded to 221 calls of service in June, patrolled just over 4,500 miles. We did pick up 4 new investigations, which we are still currently working on. As you know, one of them was the damage to Memorial Park restrooms. We are working that case and pretty confident we will have some charges coming out shortly. Another thing going on at the office, earlier this month, I turned in our training service board. Montgomery PD spent just a little over $28,000 on training last year. So with the postcard that usually, or last year, we received about half of that back. So I'm hoping sometime this fall or in windows is it in the spring even. Hopefully around 14,000 we'll get back to put back into our training budget. One other thing, I've reached out to the county. In 2018, the state mandated, or the post board mandated, that all officers within their licensing cycle now have mental health and crisis intervention training, implicit bias and community diversity training, and conflict management and mediation training. Lee Seward County has a deputy that is a certified instructor in those 3 classes. So I'm hoping to either hire him to come to Montgomery for our department, and if I spoke with Administrator Heck about it, maybe open it up to other agencies to help offset the cost. In a place like this or social distancing, we'll see how that goes. Other than that, it's been business as usual, kind of busy. The calls have picked up since the summertime, so. Any questions for me?
No questions, just a comment. Great job, and in uncertain times, I know things are difficult for the officers and the whole department down there. I just want to say that I'm behind the police department 100%, and I really enjoyed seeing that so many other members in our community are as well, with some of the subway cards that they brought in, or donuts, or things like that. Typical donut thing with the police, but
It's a stereotype.
It's very nice to see that the police department has such loving support from the community, and I just want to say thank you for all that you guys do.
Thank you for having me to be working.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Just a question too for Chief Hintz. So next weekend, this coming weekend, is all the discussion about the weekend that would normally be Kolachki Day, and how things would be handled. Have you been working on some thoughts on that, Chief? How we
We have
handle
been in
things?
contact with Administrator Hack and a couple business owners in town. At this point, we're not planning on staffing any extra officers. I believe with our normal staffing levels, we should be good. Expecting a big influx of people still. I think there'll be a lot of people coming to town for Kolachki Day weekend, even though the event's not taking place. So we'll play it out by ear.
So I talked with Cassie this morning, and things have changed for some of the establishments. They will not be doing what they had asked to have done. So I believe that a couple of them will be open Friday and Sunday. They may not be open Saturday. So it's not going to be as was discussed and described to council previously.
That was my understanding too, that there is no request for expansion on outdoor spaces at all at this point.
That is my understanding.
And some establishments will be opening under normal hours, and some will be closing early if they see overload of people.
There's a big concern that was expressed by the establishments and their ability to manage a larger influx of people, as well as the concern that the state is kind of stepping up monitoring and enforcement, particularly if there's complaints, or they're monitoring, or they find on social media that there's going to be an event, and then they may have state resources, and they are working with their local county health departments on that. They're supposed to, if they get a complaint, the Department of Health has to respond and investigate within 24 hours. And they have to actually be on site. They have to do a report, and then they have to do a follow-up 24 hours after they do the inspection. And I think the bar owners are doing the best they can given the circumstances, but they're just concerned that they won't be able to manage a large influx of people. At least that's what Nate and I had heard. Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move along to Public Works Report. Mr. Rainwald.
I got Shane online here too, so when he's ready, I'll tell him to unmute.
Just kind of give you guys brief updates on a few things. Prairie Restoration was out at our restoration area up in Northridge. They have seeded that project up there. They could not get the seed that they put down to cover crop to burn here last week. So they just drill seeded into that and then rolled the top cover crop over to help protect it. This will be an ongoing project up there. I believe we're in a 5-year contract with Prairie Restorations on this. So keep you updated on how everything goes up there. Today, talking with the park committee, we did talk a little bit more about sledding hill up there and putting in a parking lot for the Prairie Restoration. So those will be some other things that will be coming back to you guys later on. Wellco Drive project is moving along. Sounds like we'll be having some milling going on there
starting here Wednesday. Project is looking to be wrapped up around August 5th and 7th in that project area over there. So that'll be nice when that's finally completed. Kind of looked like a bomb went off there for a while, but then we've gotten back on track. Planning on doing some more fogging. I know we've been seeing a lot more complaints on Facebook about mosquitoes in town. I plan on doing probably one more fogging this month. I'm hoping the weather stays right. We'll hope Thursday night. After that fogging, we'll be hopefully have enough for 2 more treatments this year. Then we're done with fogging. That's the only chemical that we bought this year. Everything's spent. Parks, they touched on that a little bit. Memorial Park, we had some stuff with toilets. Kids were destroying, vandalizing stuff in there. Sure hope we don't have this problem again. Hopefully the kids take a little more respect with town. A lot of work to do with all that stuff going on. So, City Hall, we are scheduled with Neiman to get roof done. I do not know exact date on that right now. We also did have Chronic Plumbing and Scotty Schmidt, SJS Plumbing, give us quotes on going hands-free in all our bathrooms at City Hall. Chronic Plumbing, got awarded him the bid on that. So hopefully we'll have that within a couple weeks. We'll be getting that after some of the bigger patching. Just short-handed right now. Some stuff that's going on. MnDOT did allow us to use their air patcher last week and help us out with that. It's really nice to have them with their equipment that they have and be able to use it and have a good working relationship that way. So, a few other things. We also received our new garbage cans for down on Main Street. So, kind of seen those one garbage cans down along Main Street that have the wooden glass on there. Going away with one ones, so that we match just like the ones that are by like Frankie's Bakery, stuff like that. So we received them today, so hopefully we can get. Carol Lilla sign is up. They screwed up on half, so they're working to get that finished and finish installing the other half. That's installed up there by the softball fields. And just for you guys' notes, July 31st through the 5th, I'm going to be going up to Cabot, so I'm taking on for fishing. So, any questions?
Comment. Thank you for the Dropbox, whoever gets credit for that or everybody, but at City Hall, I used it a couple times.
Patty and Chris.
Yeah, it makes life a little easier for everybody.
So,
yeah.
And that's, we got to be working on getting sectors done for that, so people really know what's right. All right, we got Shane who's ready.
I got one more.
Oh, wait, hold on, Shane.
Back to mosquito control. So I did receive quite a few comments and calls and actually over the last few days. I understand the concept. I truthfully, it's not a process that works well. I'm thinking or hoping that maybe at some point, maybe you can put something together or work with Brian to put something together that we can put something out to the general public on actually how it works. The questions I had were, why are they spraying in the middle of the street instead of directing it over to the yards? And once I explained on how it all worked, they were like, oh, now I get it. So I think just a little bit of education about how the whole process works. Well, a lot of questions thought it was actually a liquid that was going out. And it's not really a liquid, it's a vapor. So if there's something that maybe we could put out as to kind of inform the public actually what this process does. That might help a little bit. And one of the larger questions was, well, why don't they spray during the day? And then when I answered, because I remember asking you this question several years ago when you first came on as Public Works Director, and absolutely no good. The mosquito was flying in the air. So I just think maybe a little bit of public information would maybe down some of the negative comments. I mean, some of the negative comments on social media got brutal, basically. And it was basically just a lack of knowledge on understanding how it works. If you could put something together, work with Brian and Patty, that maybe we can get something out on the website at some point in time.
Yep, and I'll even talk with Clark Control, that's where we buy our product from, for fogging, and maybe they have something on there for even education and stuff like that.
Yes, actually, one of the questions was what does it do for pollinators? What person pollinators, because they saw what happened in a city southwest of here, they used a helicopter and sprayed and it killed all the bees. So they're very concerned about that. So this maybe some general information would be helpful. So, all right, thank you. Appreciate that. We're ready for
Shane. You ready to go?
Shane.
Yes, sir.
All right, rock and roll, Shane.
Well, at the beginning of the month, Minnesota Pump Works replaced the lift station pumps in Northridge Lift Station. Now the ABS piranhas are in there. They seem to be working good. It's both pumps are down basically an hour a week. They're only running 2 hours a week now. Also, the water tower. Oh, sorry. The water tower. T-Mobile was up there with the water tower. They're putting in. They're making the cell phone service better for everybody. I think they're almost after this crew's out. Then all of a sudden later on, another crew's coming to paint the or do the touch-up paint for their product. And another note, New Preg's dumping at the Montgomery wastewater plant again. They're bringing about 2 loads a day now. They should be done in about, it was 3 weeks total, so they got about 2 weeks left if everything goes well. Otherwise, it's just been business as usual. Any questions?
Okay, so any questions for Shane? I'll kind of reiterate. We kind of got a bad internet connection here. It's kind of cracking up a little bit.
Okay.
So the water tower, T-Mobile's just finishing up putting on the antennas. They gotta do the touch up and the paint to get that done. Hopefully the project is to update and upgrade the service for T-Mobile. And then the last item that he had talked about was the New Prague. New Prague did get the parts for their digester, and so they have been hauling their digester material to our plant, and it's about 6,400 gallons per truck, and they're taking, what, 2 or 3 trucks a day?
About 2.
About 2 trucks a day. So if you recall, the first time they were hauling stuff here, it was because their plant burned up again. And so they were hauling stuff to us while they got their plant, their mechanical doing maintenance on the digesters. So we're getting that's again $65 per 1,000 gallons that they're paying, and 2 trucks a day at 6,400 gallons per truck. That'll generate a little bit more revenue for the wastewater plant going forward here. So any questions for Shane? Nope. Thank you, Shane.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move along into administration. 6.1, resolution 38-2020, ordering public improvements and preparation of plans.
Chris, you want to do this? This is your project.
My baby. Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. So obviously, for your consideration is the resolution ordering improvement preparation plans. I guess obviously you saw the scope as presented. Schedule as outlined. If you have our proposal for engineering, you refer to page 5. Again, the schedule again is, we would immediately begin the design work on this. Critical path item is actually going to be working with the golf course to try to work through what we are going to do for a pond there. We'll have to get easements, et cetera. And we have to go through a wetland permitting process. So regardless of the condition or classification of the wetland, it is a wetland, but generally for giving it so degraded, then it'll be accepted as a pond. So that's probably the critical item. We do hope to bid that out this fall. If that doesn't work schedule-wise, or we can't get through the permitting process fast enough, we'll probably have to push it off till spring or even the following fall and accommodate some temporary conditions for that pond. So right now our schedule is to complete plans just prior to Christmas, bring them back for the December meeting, authorize advertising for bids, open bids in early February, and bring it to council for consideration of the assessments and award of bids at the February meeting. We do have a little bit of wiggle room if we need it, but again, that's the proposed schedule given the size of the project and the nature of the work, et cetera. So I guess with that, we'll get into the proposal next, but I guess any questions regarding the presentation, comments, or other questions that maybe come up from the public hearing? Again, the nature and scope of the project.
So just from a structural standpoint, you'd take action on the resolution first, and then you'd move on as a separate item to the design proposal.
Any comments from City Council?
In December, when we authorize advertising for bids, that's when all the bids actually go out.
It gets advertised in the local newspaper and the online services, so the contractors find out about it. They'll be picking up plans in January, putting together the bids in January.
So I'd imagine this would be kind of a nice project for somebody to pick up. It could be pretty well widespread.
Yeah, it'll be early, so you'd like to think it's going to be competitive because, hey, if we get a good project early on, get that set up. Or you could also have the philosophy of, well, this is an early project and I've got a few more chances down the road, so it depends on how urgent they are. But yeah, definitely for a project this size, we need to bid it early, and that puts us in the best position.
Any other comments?
A question for Chris, and you kind of touched on this golf course part of that project. Chris, are all those costs, is that all built into the stormwater cost in here?
Correct.
That's all already in there, everything we need to know.
Yeah, and just to clarify a little bit, so we did, as part of the feasibility study, we did do a kind of a more comprehensive stormwater management plan or study of the drainage from this neighborhood and as it passes through the golf course. Looked at elevations, where they flood and things like that. We have proposed what we're calling Pond A. Pond A is directly north of the Circle Drive development. We identified another pond we called Pond B, which is it's actually existing pond part on the near the fairway that suggested that could be expanded as well. We're not proposing that under this project, we're proposing just Pond A. But we also decided that as part of our negotiation, there may be some coordination and joint effort between the golf course and the city. The golf course has an architect they're working with, the landscape or golf course architect, and they have also looked at some potential pond expansions and fairway improvements to help with the flooding situation. And so as part of our negotiation, there may be some opportunity to coordinate where the city would take care of the cost for this Pond A, but maybe the golf course, for example, takes care of the cost for Pond B and we do it as a joint project or something. Again, if it all works out well, we would propose to actually bid that one out separately, go out to actually quotes. So pull that aside, go out to quotes and have that work done separately this fall. Again, unless we have issues with timing on this wetland permitting process, then we'll have to go to a plan B and we'll invest to do it, how best to bid it.
Okay, thank you.
in discussions with the golf course, their preference is to have this project done, obviously, when it's not their season. So late fall, over the winter, early spring before their golf course opens to minimize the financial impact on the golf course.
Any other discussion? All right, hearing none, I will entertain a motion to approve resolution 38-2020 or approve or entertain any motion.
I'll make a motion to approve resolution 38-2020, the 21 street utility improvement project ordering preparation plans and improvement.
I'll second. Butch for the first, Bob with the second. No further discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. 6.2, consideration of proposal by SEH for design and construction engineering.
Okay, thanks. Thank you, Mayor. I think you probably have the proposal in front of you. Probably jumping mostly to page 2. We're referring to this as phase 2 and phase 3. Phase 2 is kind of really the design phase of this project, planning and preparation. So the first part, final design, plan specification, bidding, pretty much is straightforward. It's what we've dealt with on other projects, etc. Typically, when we go through this process, we'll go through some questionnaires and things like that to get information from people. But the other thing we like to do is have an open house meeting, and we'll try to figure out how we can get creative with that. Just, we don't know where we're going to set from. Typically, we like to do something like that back in January before we actually have the assessment hearing and things like that. Other things, easements and right of way. So we will have to get easements from the golf course. So we've got scope in here to do descriptions, etc., and then work with Tim to put the documents together and get the signatures and things like that. Assessments, obviously, part of phase 2. Water resources. So the golf course pond expansion, again, we'll go into final design with that. We'll work with the golf course and have discussions on exactly what that scope is going to be. It's all been kind of designed preliminarily, and now it's a matter of just getting it down to the details. The other thing that we're looking at, and I guess I didn't mention it in the presentation, is the storm sewer that comes down Rogers Drive onto Hickory will flows down, basically flows down First Street, and shifts over to Second Street, flows south to Boulevard, way undersized. We've already identified that there's probably some priority to look at that area, that neighborhood to the south as the next project. And one of the ways to help alleviate not only the current situation with some flooding and over capacity storm sewer is to look at an opportunity to do some timing in North Side Park here. So we're looking at opportunity to do some timing, off-system timing off of Hickory into the park there to help kind of act as a reliever or surge. And so that is also proposed as part of the scope of work here. Wetland delineation, I kind of mentioned again, probably the first thing it has to do, critical path item, is a wetland delineation on the golf course. And we had proposed to do the wetland delineation that we have to do around Pond A. I'm suggesting for what's in the matter of a few more additional field hours is to do delineation around the area of Pond B, which is the area that the golf course we want to look at. Again, I think it will help us provide the information for them at a low cost to help with our negotiation on the pond negotiations for the pond easement, etc. So we have to go through a wetland permitting process through the Corps of Engineers. That will basically, it will be the critical path item. Sometimes you can go quick, sometimes you can take long, and that might affect our schedule for the pond construction. The rest of this proposal is what I call phase 3, which is the construction engineering. So after it's been, prepare construction documents, construction administration. Construction observation is basically the inspector, or what we call resident project representative, RPR. Construction staking, etc. That's where we're at. The fees that are proposed are summarized there on page 5. And as I noted, this is the total at the bottom is the total for this proposal. And I think I had it summarized on the detail sheet at the end, total for the project, et cetera. So it included the feasibility study as well. This is what we're proposing today. I guess with that, any questions? Obviously, it's a pretty large project, and the fee is worth nothing about that.
What's this number I'm looking at here, 552,000, is that this number?
That's the total of phase 2 and phase 3. I think the feasibility study was approximately 60,000. So that would be the total fee on the project. It comes to 613,300 would be the total. But what we're proposing right now is the bottom line, 552,800.
Any additional comments?
Project manager, so this will be a job we'll have, and I was trying to read the details on that, but more or less we'll have a full-time SEH engineer on this job, monitoring every day.
There'll be a full-time, so I budgeted for a full-time inspector, resident project representative, and then also included time for a second at times when the work entails. And that part of the fee, we have that, so that part of the fee can be very unknown. It depends on contractors, schedules, a bunch of other things. So there's a little bit of contingency in there, but that's the hourly not to exceed. So there's opportunity to save money if things become more efficient. We don't need the staff, et cetera. That's pretty much how I've always done that, running in the projects as well. So.
Other comments? All right. I would entertain a motion to approve the consideration of proposal and the agreement for professional services.
I'd make a motion to consider the proposed agreement with SEH for design and construction engineering for the 2021 street improvement project.
Second.
Thank you, Mick, for the first, and thank you, Dennis, for the second. Any additional comments? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you. Appreciate it very much.
You have your work cut out for you.
Thank you.
We will move along to 6.3. Here it says approve ordinance 8-2020. Attorney Warren Mundy and the police department are recommending small amendments to the nuisance code that will enable better enforcement of the nuisance code. I got the first glance at this just the other day, so Mr. Warren Mundy or
Let Tim take this one. This is, I'm tired of talking nuisance changes, so Tim can do it.
okay.
Before I start, I do want to point out that as frustrated as Brian is with me continually redoing this part of the code, I want to point out I'm still way less expensive than the city engineer.
I'm more than one person.
All right, this is just some small changes in the code. As you saw, we had the word Montgomery spelled wrong. It probably looks bad when we can't spell our city's name correctly. So we fixed that. And if you look at page 105, of your handout, and you look at page 105, where you see the word automobile, we have no definition of the word automobile, but we do have a definition that we adopted for motor vehicle. So the obvious change is to take out the word automobile and replace it with motor vehicle, because the definition of motor vehicle applies to all kinds of things that can be bad sitting in your yard. four-wheelers that have been abandoned, snowmobiles that have been abandoned, motorcycles, lawnmowers, all of that fits within the definition of motor vehicle under the statute. And so by making this change, most of it is just tightening down some screws so that when Officer Seepson, who does most of the public nuisance inspections, does an inspection, he can more easily figure out what the problem is, identify it, and that way the city administrator can then send out his letter better identifying what the problem is to the landowner, and it makes it more easy for me to prosecute in front of a judge who looks at this and says, what are you doing? What are you calling public nuisance here? And when we're a little bit more specific, it's easier for the judge to understand.
Especially with the name of the city spelled correctly. This probably is a useless code when we don't even have the city of right?
You got it covered now.
Okay.
So this is just tightening down some screws, guys. It just helps us out. It'll make this the police department's job easier. It'll make my job easier, and therefore make your wishes that we clean up this town easier to carry out. That's all I ask.
Well, I will make a comment that since the nuisance code has changed within the last, I don't know, we'll be through this last fall.
Yeah.
What a difference. I mean, I've seen some properties that have been just difficult properties for many, many years that look great. Things have changed. So I personally noticed a big change with this code, that the community's looking better. I give credit to Officer Seepson for watching out for that, and obviously for Mr. Heck, that's more work for him every time something comes in, another letter to send. But I think this is working well, so I would definitely be in support to approve ordinance 8-2020. We have any other discussion on it?
I got a question about within that now, you have lumber, wood of any type, and then also
Which page?
on 105, in the M, where you have
Yes,
the
I see it.
automotive,
Right?
says lumber, wood of any type, recreational, motor vehicle accessory, not limited to toppers for motor vehicles. You said lumber, wood of any type. So if people have the firewood stack, fire pit, or, the recreational stuff.
This gives the officer discretion, because here's what we're trying to stop. What people do, and you've seen it, they will have ladders, they will have lumber that they purchased, they will have doors leaning up against stuff out in the yard. And when we were just talking about lumber, people would come back and say, oh, that's not in the lumber yard, so it's not lumber. And so what this does is it talks about wood of any type that constitutes a violation. What you're talking about would not fall within violation. It's the kind of thing that it is a public nuisance.
So I got my topper sitting alongside my garage right now, that remove it from my truck, but not violation.
You could be if it stays there for very long. If it just sits there and becomes part of the a decoration of your yard,
Well, it's gonna go back on the truck, but
that's different. Then that's not what we're shooting for. There's a couple places in town I can take you on a tour of where there
It
are
all
trees
uses-
growing up.
sometimes you put a blanket down on it, and then all of a sudden everybody's, oh my God, they're taking away more of our free use of our properties.
I understand what you're saying, but if we start abusing our discretion, then you can tighten it down. For now, we know what we're looking for, and I think we've got a pretty good track record of not overstepping.
So one of the examples that came up was somebody has their snowmobiles on a trailer, and the snowmobiles are covered with their little snowmobile cover, and it's parked next to their garage on a parking pad, as opposed to someone who has two snowmobiles on blocks in the yard. The person that's got them organized and neat on a trailer parked next to their garage on a parking pad is okay. The person that's got them on blocks sitting in the backyard with weeds growing through them, not okay. a nice stack of firewood that maybe has a tarp over it to keep it dry is different than a jumbled pile of brush. So as Tim says, yes, a blanket statement could indicate that those two things are covered, but that goes back to the discretion. And the good thing is I get to look at the pictures and I can say that's a stack of firewood being stored for their wood burning stove or whatever the case may be. So.
Accumulations in the open of discarded or disused. So you're taking it off and putting it back on. It is not discarded or disused. Boy, when you see the piles around town that we have pictures of, you'll know what the definition of discarded is.
I've seen the yards, I know, but, you know, the next person, they may not get along with their neighbor perhaps or something, and somebody takes their topper off, sets it down. Well, follow that in, you know.
But amp owners were discarded or disused. Like I say, a tree growing up to it.
Page 103, number G. Garbage receptacles. So garbage receptacles that are left at the curb more than 24 hours after collection.
That's actually been in our code for years.
That has been, but I bet I could go within 2 blocks and find 6 garbage cans laying in the street or laying on the boulevard that nobody ever puts them away. On my street down here on
Taking notes?
Third,
Taking notes, Nate?
they're out there all the time. They're everywhere. I bet I could find 6 of them within just walking distance of the Legion. And they've been sitting there now. They were recycling. They were emptied on Friday, and a lot of them blew over in the wind, and they're still laying on their side. And it just drives me nuts. But I see them. I can see 7, 8, 9 of them a day just laying around town like that. So, anyway, I see it and it bothers me because I think I don't like it, and I see it. They're right in my neighborhood. In fact, I picked one up the other day because it was laying there in the street, and I thought, somebody's got to pick the stuff up. It can't just lay in the street, so.
Maybe that can be added to the highlights newsletter.
Yeah. Well, or you start writing people fines for it too. That change, that's what we're supposed to do.
Not yet.
We can send off.
I'll start calling you and telling you where they're at.
Please do.
I will.
I know there's a bunch on the north side of Old Fifth Street in my office. And Nick's right. There's a bunch right there too.
Yeah.
And it annoys me, but I figure I shouldn't be the one who pulls the trigger.
Yeah.
My neighbor does it quite a bit, and I just pulled it up for him. But he's out of town a lot. Any more discussion or questions on ordinance 8-2020?
I'll make a motion to approve ordinance 8/2020, waive the second reading and authorize for publication.
Second.
Dennis with first, Butch with the second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. 6.4, CARES Act spending. This is you, Brian, right?
Yeah, this is me.
Good overview, by the way.
So, thank you. One of the things that I learned while being in a webinar hosted by the League of Minnesota Cities, and actually the person who runs the COVID office at the state was the speaker on this. And the topic was, you get this money, you have to use it within the requirements or the parameters of the federal government. How are you going to do that? And one of the things that was made relatively clear is that any of the use of these dollars should be documented and approved by the council. So we went through what the CARES Act allows us to spend money on. And the first thing is we're going to get roughly $231,000 to offset many of the costs that the city has incurred thus far with regard to the COVID pandemic response. And it all has to be related to response, mitigation, enforcement, et cetera, of the COVID thing. So we've talked about what could be covered in the past. I'm not going to go over a lot of detail with what can be covered. What I want to go over is what we're recommending the dollars be used for. So first of all, one of the biggest items that we want to use the dollars for is to improve and upgrade and to cover the cost of the things we've already done from technology standpoint. Obviously, we've got the Zoom subscription that we're using. We got a subscription to improve our agenda software. We acquired machines, hardware for the police department. We had some of our other staff had to get remote access put on their machines so they could work from home to meet the requirements of the executive order. In order to do the virtual and live or in-person meetings, we need to update our wireless at City Hall. Right now, as we learned on Thursday when we tried to do it with some problems. So we need to bump that up. And also we've learned that remote access into our server has caused some problems. So we need to update and upgrade our server. Our server was put in 2014. It's really not robust enough to manage all of the remote in and outs that the people have. We also had staff that upgraded some personal internets and whatnot at home. So again, they could utilize the work from home. That total is about $53,000, $54,000 to do those updates. Facility improvements. Chris had touched on the hands-free sinks or faucets and whatnot in all the facilities at City Hall. We have the service window. If you haven't been to City Hall recently, we've got the service window up. We've got new door locks on the City Hall as well as the police department. We've got some, I'm going to call them sneeze guards set up for City Council. So when the City Council comes back to for you, to keep you from sneezing and coughing and whatnot on each other. Got the drop box for City Hall. We also acquired fencing, barricades, and other things for when we secured the parks and for the bar owners when we did the outdoor seating and whatnot. So we got that. That's another $18,000. By far, the two largest, or the other large item, the EDA provided grants to businesses. And then there's also another grant that the EDA is working on that would provide for e-commerce. Those total grants are about $57,000 to those local businesses. And then we can cover staffing costs for this. So any staff that has spent a portion of their time or a significant amount of their time working with or managing the enforcement and mitigation of COVID-19, those staff hours can be utilized. We've had my time, Patty's time, and Leah's time in on that. We also can cover the cost of any staff who have to quarantine for exposure or possible exposure to someone with the COVID-19. We've had 3 staff thus far who have been required to quarantine. Those dollars can be utilized to cover that cost. We do have, in case we do have to quarantine other people, we've got a few dollars left to do that. That's $96,000. The total we're looking at right now is $226,000 to of the $230,000 that has been allocated. Again, I want to make sure that if we have another quarantine, we got a few dollars left to cover that. I would anticipate the way things are going that we may have another quarantine or two. Yeah, that about summarizes how and what we're going to use the dollars for. Any questions?
When would these dollars actually be available?
So we sent off the certification on July 2nd, and I believe the state has some kind of a schedule. We should be getting those dollars dropped into our account in the next week or so, if we haven't already received it. Yep. So it's not if we're going to get it, we are going to get it.
Do you want to update council of the timeline that these have to be?
Oh, yep.
has to be spent by?
So the federal government has the December 30th timeline for states to use the funds. The state in their distribution of this, cities are required to use and have the money spent by November 15th. And the guideline, and I just looked it up this afternoon, the guidance is spent means the check has gone out the door or the goods and services have been provided, but the check hasn't been cut yet. If the goods and services have been provided, then you've got another 90 days basically to spend that dollar. So we are going to run into a situation with our cleaning service because that's a monthly bill. So we're going to have to talk to our cleaning service to make sure that that bill that comes in October includes November and December, because we're going to run out of time. And so we want to make sure that we got that structured right. And then same thing with some of the other monthly bills that we have, we're going to have to take care of that ahead of time. So, but November 15th is the date. Any dollars that are not spent or I'm going to say encumbered that should have, where the goods and services have been provided, those dollars go back to the county. And then the county has until early December to spend any remaining dollars that they have. And if they don't spend by that date in December, I think it's like December 5th or 10th or something like that, all the money rolls back to the state, and then the state has to spend it by the 30th of December. It's very clear that we don't want to leave money on the table. The counties don't want to leave money on the table, and the state doesn't want to leave money on the table. So we're going to do all we can to make sure we find every available expenditure that qualifies to be added to this expense.
As we get closer, if there's dollars left over, we may have to get creative with more hands-free technology, whether that be, touchless flushometers, things like that in the bathrooms.
Yep.
I'm sure we can come up with.
Yep. So what we're going to do at City Hall is every toilet and every urinal and every sink is going to be the hands-free stuff. Yep. All the toilets and sinks are all going to be hands-free.
But you could maybe
Yep.
do automatic lighting where it turns on when you come in automatic. So you don't have to touch the
Yep.
switch.
We
I'm
talked.
just saying
Yep.
There's some ways to burn up that.
Yep,
last
we
$5,000
talked about
if you need.
the auto lights. We're getting, I don't know, they're on back order, but they're the soap dispensers that are hands-free soap dispensers too. So we're getting all those things. We did talk to the library. I think they're already hands-free in the library, but if they're not, we will upgrade them as well. Mick?
We need some council action on this, Brian, or this is just?
Yes, council action to approve the expenditure plan would be helpful.
Okay, I'll make a motion then to approve the expenditure plan for the CARES budget summary as presented.
I'll second that.
Mick with the first, Bob with the second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Move along to the 2021 budget discussion.
All right, since it's getting late, I will make this quick. As of this current rendition of the budget, I've programmed about a 2.5% increase in the base levy. That does not include the debt levy. The debt levy is 189. That's down a little bit from last year. Keep in mind that that includes the 138,000 that is dedicated to the deficit reduction of the capital expense or the capital general capital fund 401, and that was discussed earlier this year. Transfers, we're looking at 225 into the street fund, 70,000 into the park fund, 50,000 into the equipment fund, and $25,000 into the facility improvement fund. Right now, as it sits, we're looking at about a $39,000 deficit of expenditures over revenues. There are ways to make that up. We can make it up in additional reductions in expenditures, or we can make it up with additional enhancements to revenue, which would generally be increasing the base levy. Right now, if you had a 2.5% levy increase, that is about a 1% reduction in the tax rate. So you're increasing it by 2.5%, but we've had growth in our existing values as well as new construction from the last couple of years. And so the tax rate goes down. So you could increase the levy more than the 2.5%, and it would be a negligible impact on, I mean, it may increase the tax rate a little bit, but the overall impact on the average homeowner isn't going to be the amount that one would think if you go up higher. There's two additional requests that we're looking at this point. One, we were approached by the Historical Society. They would like consideration for funding so that they can acquire a building to open up their Montgomery Historical Museum. The law changed a year or so ago, and the cities are now authorized to provide funding to local historical societies as long as they are affiliated and certified by the Minnesota State Historical Society. I do not know if the Montgomery Historical Society is affiliated and certified by the Minnesota Historical Society. If they are not, then the city cannot provide them funding. The other, and this is, yeah, go ahead.
So Brian and I received a request from the Historical Society. We had Brian and I had a very brief conversation about it. I replied back to the Historical Society, as did Brian. I didn't even want to discuss it at all until it comes to council as a group in a work session. I thought it'd be more appropriate. I know there's going to be many different opinions on this whole subject. So instead of going through all of this research and finding out what we can or can't do, or coming together with, or having them come together with some sort of package, I requested that whether it's in a work session or something like that, that we sit down with the Historical Society and the council as a group, and then we could get discussion. And if it ends early in the discussion, it ends early in the discussion. If it goes further, then we'll put the time and effort into it. So at this point, the information that you have there, that's all we have.
That's it.
That's
Yep.
it. That's all we've talked about it at this point.
We don't know what amount they're asking for or anything like that. It's just they want to be, they want to have council give consideration to some funding to their operation.
Brian, did you do the math on this 0.02?
I don't know, probably.
It was roughly 100 and some thousand.
No, it's about 50. Yeah.
Just get it up.
Because that's that would be the base of what is the value of the city, 22 million. 212 million plus estimated market value. Yeah. I suggested in the email back to the Historical Society that we do it in some sort of work session, because it's 9:05. You guys know what every council meeting is like. We don't need to have that discussion during council.
Right. Yeah, and I'm not,
We'll talk about it.
yeah, I'm not looking for any action or anything like that tonight. I'm basically laying out where we're at. As I said, the other item is a request for a part-time administrative assistant in the office. It's been chaotic this year in that office. We have 32 plus 32 new homes. Probably one final read each day. We used to only do about one every couple of months. Because every time a house sells, every time there is a new renter that comes in, we got to do final reads. Patty can attest that there's a couple of things that are kind of getting fallen behind on that need to be caught up on. I've got Christina taking work home at night. I've got Patty coming in on the weekends. It's not a good situation. So we're looking for the possibility of having a part-time person. It would be funded through the general fund, the communications fund, and the utilities. So what we're looking at right now, and what I want the council to think about, and we'll do a work session the first Monday in August, and this will be one of the topics that will be of discussion. And I can do some scenarios. If you want me to do some scenarios, I will bring some scenarios to the council at that meeting. So the first would be, what are you looking for on a base levy? Is 2.5 good? Should it be higher? Should it be lower? What is the impact? And I can bring that information to council.
Where were we for 2020?
2020, I think it was 7%. And then again, because of the growth in the tax base, the actual taxable amount, or the actual amount that people were paying was the same or a little less than what they paid the previous year, because the tax rate keeps going down.
Right, and that, I'm not speaking for council, but for myself, I'm gonna probably look at the higher level again, as long as we can give some sort of reduction in the end, because we need to start moving through these projects here. We just need to get.
And I will have some.
These are exciting times for Montgomery. We let them slip through our fingers.
I will have some information on our survey, and I can tell you right now that we have to up the budget on mosquito, and Chris did. That is like the number one, one of the number one things that people want is mosquito spraying. And the other thing we talked about at the Park Commission, one of the other priorities that people are asking for, at least on the survey, expanded walking paths and trails. Just a minute, Tim. Historical Society funding, transfer to the improvement funds. Are they good? Should they be more? Should they be less? Also, can you think of any areas that, you know, maybe we're a little thick on with the budget? And again, without seeing all the detail, which I will provide, you know, so those are some of the questions that I want council to think about on going forward before we get to the August work session. Tim.
I just want to point out that the mosquito complainers, I'd be willing to take off my place about dusk. And in about 30 minutes, I think they stop complaining.
Councilor, I want to mention something about the mosquito complaints. I mean, I know we have some responsibility to try to keep it down to a minimum, but when does it become the city's responsibility to get rid of all the mosquitoes out of everybody's backyard?
Yep, and that's a discussion that you know, council is going to have. So
This has been a problem with mosquito control in Montgomery for many years. Let's just face it. In my personal opinion, it is probably one of the most ridiculous budget items because it basically doesn't do much. And we either have to come up with something that does something great, or buy everybody a chug of tally bar.
The county doesn't go and spray my dad's backyard, you know. They don't go around the township and spray township backyard.
It's every year, it's the same thing, it's this time of year, it's mosquitoes. 6 months from now, we got the call about the snow plow.
$65 on a jug of spray, and yeah, I still got mosquitoes in the backyard, but.
yeah, not as bad. Yeah, so that's, again, those are some discussion items for the third when we have a work session. And
These would all be work session items.
Yep.
Don't need any decisions.
no, I just really wanted to give you an update of where we're at and the two main requests that we're looking at for ads on the budget and the impact of those ads on the budget.
So when you have the last one, number 5, about thoughts on areas to trim the budget, can you send out like, just email out the 2020 budget? That way council kind of has an idea, go over it. I mean, budget seems to be pretty cut and dry. You know what it cost you last year, but if we're trying to come up with creative and come up with ways, maybe just taking a look at some of the numbers might be helpful.
And the biggest expense, as you all know, is our labor. We've got the 2.5 or 2% increase plus some folks have steps. Thankfully, our health insurance costs are only going up 2.2%. So that is a really good thing. But we have more people who are going off of the single onto the family, which adds to that cost. So there's a balancing act there that we're. The last item, it doesn't need a lot of discussion, but I don't want it to get lost. The council had, I'm not even sure what discussion on the facility. Okay. And the decision there, or sort of the consensus, was to get a group of people together. Each council member find 1 or 2 people and put together a task force of some sort. So the question is, have you found those people? Are we ready to move forward on that? So that would be the discussion at the work session. And then how do you want to structure and move forward on that study group? So I want to keep that on the forefront. I don't want it to drop off the cliff.
And I thank you for that. That's one of my primary goals here, finishing out the last of my term here, is not only just on the police facility, but overall. I mean, the entire facility, all of our facilities, where we're moving from there, and hopefully have some sort of step moving in for, whether it's the same council that we're sitting here together, we have a new group that we have some sort of motion moving forward that I remember being in the meeting when Butch and Bob were appointed, or just before you got appointed as council members, and city council basically said, we're going to leave this for the next council to make a decision. I don't want to do that, no matter whether we're working here as a group together next year at this time or we have new members. Let's hopefully have something put in place moving forward, some sort of plan, whether it's just beginning the task force so any new members that would happen to come in, we have a direction. That's very important. So we will talk about that in work session.
Yep. That's all I got.
Okay, staff and council reports. Let's start with you, Brian. Do you have anything?
Very briefly, I learned today that Representative Lippert is going to be doing some kind of listening or speaking or something, and he'll be here in the Legion on Thursday afternoon or Thursday evening. The Kolachki, what is it, the presentation of the candidates or the royalty? That's going to happen on Friday. Thursday, 5 to 6, you can take a look at the new mural that is going to be unveiled this Thursday. Drive by and look at it, or socially distance and watch it. So those are a couple of things. And then, as I said, we've got 32 new homes, either already permitted and going or in the process of going, and it's almost $6 million worth of value on those homes. That's really good news. The bad news is we're running out of lots faster than we had anticipated. So the Planning Commission is going to have to be looking at the possibility of, should we and where should we be looking at additional or new subdivisions? I think at the current rate, or actually about half the rate, we're now at about 5 years worth of lots, as opposed to 2 years ago, we had 20 years worth of lots. So, and I talked to Loomis, Scott Loomis, and he's got 4 or 5 lots already sold, and they're going to be bringing in about 4 or 5 more houses. So it's surprisingly, it's very interesting as to why this year is a big boom year, whereas the previous years were not. So
It is interesting, and Mr. McGuire and I had a real good conversation last week about this very thing, about how busy the planning and zoning is going to be here now. Having to, something that they were thinking is out there, but we can kind of, it's not something we got to really work on now. Now that it's on, it's time.
Yep. Not looking forward to it.
Yep, so good luck with that.
So yeah, that's where we're at.
Any council reports?
I think Tom was in conversation with the gentleman about possibly purchasing something downtown. Hector or something like that.
Oh, yeah,
He lives in Waconia, I believe.
yeah, and actually, I sent them the email address to contact Brian and Leah, and I believe Leah has been contacted.
Yep.
Yeah.
Sounds like he has purchased Chester's old building.
Okay.
So I believe he'll be probably in contact with.
Okay. Yeah, we've got, well, on that, so there's a new business going in at 300 First Street, the old Parsons building. And Jeremy Gares is hopefully going to be opening up his facility coming up soon. And I've been in contact with a couple of more people who are interested in building or opening a business on First Street. And we're going to have the EDA also, I should say this. One, there's that e-commerce grant. And the EDA is also going to start taking applications for the exterior facility improvement program, grant program as well. So.
How about Tarba's building? Where do we have Tarba's building?
Mr. Tarba was supposed to have provided a response to the order from the city by July 8th. No such order was received, but I have been in communication with an individual who is and has been talking to Mr. Tarba about purchasing that building. So I've been working with Mr. Whips, who's the lead attorney on that one. And we will be moving forward on it, but we want to keep moving forward on it, but we also would like to see this person, if they can, rehabilitate the building, because it'd be nicer to have a building on First Street than to have another vacant grassy lot. So.
Yeah, the Montgomery Historical Society very much opposed of the council's action. They understood that they were asking that we think this over because you guys all, I know Butch and I attended, I believe you were there too, Nick, when they had the presentation of their historical plans downtown, that the removal of this building would basically sink that with the building. But
yeah,
it's all been rumor at this point, nothing solid.
Yep. He was talking to a realtor in New Prague. I met with him personally and advised him to get an architect and or an engineer to evaluate the building so he knows exactly what he's getting into. So.
Any other council comments? Mayor's report will be quick. Friday, KDHL is going to be here for something called Montgomery Community Days. They have chosen Montgomery as a city that they want to highlight. There's going to be a few of us that are going to be on the radio with Nicole Brandon, I believe her name is.
Yes.
We're doing some interviews. They'll be interviewing me, someone from the Historical Society, someone from the Chamber, I believe someone from the Community Club. Yep. Maybe you as
maybe
well.
Me.
So
they need a real radio voice.
Spend the day here and kind of bebop around and find out a little bit about Montgomery, and it's featured, or they're highlighting Montgomery. I believe they're highlighting a couple communities, but we're the first one. So that's happening Friday, so there should be some live broadcasting. KDHL's on Faribault. And then the last item I had is, even though we're not having a Klotchke Days, we're still having a Klotchke Days. Lots of virtual events that are being announced every day. Kind of some neat stuff. So hopefully, if you're interested, get on the Community Club's website and follow some of that stuff. all the way from the puzzle thing and coloring contests and there's even rumor of a flash parade happening. So we'll see what happens. So keep your eyes open even on their social media. Some pretty neat stuff we're throwing together at the last minute. I think they did a fantastic job to keep the tradition going. That, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment. So, okay, we got Bob with the first, Butch with the first, Bob with the second. I don't think we have any further discussion, so all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Council is in adjournment at 9:21. Thank you, everybody.